Mhm. I am live. Hey there, my dear witches. Welcome back to the Sober Witch Life Sunshine's Guide to a Magical and Mystical Recovery. And today we're talking about, I think the last episode that I did, we talked about staying sober in the holidays. And so when I was sitting there and reflecting about what to talk about today, we're going to talk about relapses during the winter holiday season, because the reality is, uh, yes, sometimes it can be very challenging and difficult to stay on this path. Uh, and that means a relapse can happen. And so we're going to talk about that today. You know, when I think back about my own personal journey, I ended up first dancing around the concept and the topic of sobriety after the holidays, right? And I don't even recall or remember what it was like. Um, the holiday before I decided to get sober. I would imagine not very pleasant. At the time, the gentleman that I was dating, rest in peace, Keith, struggled through the holidays. So they were always kind of a little bit tough for us. We fought a little bit more. He got a little bit darker. And yeah, often we would turn to alcohol to deal with that. That was something that him and I did very well together, was drink. Though it was destroying us both. But it was January. It was the 1st of January that I'd committed to initially starting to like toy with this concept of not drinking, no longer having alcohol be a part of my life. So I didn't have my relapses during the holiday season. And even what I would have shared in the last episode, I did get sober. So I'd stepped into my like full recovery on October 9th, right before the holiday season started, right? I think holiday season starts with Halloween. And so I was really concerned about that, like, staying sober and things of that nature. But I didn't personally experience the relapse to alcohol. But I do have a lot of other addictions, right? I have an addictive personality. I think many of us that, identify as an addict or dance around that addict space or anything of that nature, have addiction in our life, have more than one. And so I have often stated, I'm a recovering alcoholic, workaholic, perfectionist, and control freak. And what I don't often share as well, that I struggle with food addiction, a shopping addiction, on top of that control and that perfectionism. And so food is one of those that I tend to find I relapse on the most, right? The reality is, and I've talked with my therapist about this, when I was in therapy, you have to eat. And so it's really easy to justify, kind of what we start consuming or anything of that nature. And though I don't binge eat as much as I once did when I was a lot younger, right? My disordered eating isn't so much into that space. I will still eat things that I know my body doesn't like. And it's just, I don't even know why it happens. Um, I've sat in it, and I should say I do know a bit, and I'll share a little bit as to why it happens. But yeah, it's wild. Like it's a relapse that I have. And this year, it started. It started around the beginning of November and continued right past Thanksgiving. And, I look back at it and it's like I justify it in the same way that I would have like an alcoholic drink or a beverage, like, oh, it's just one, right? It's just one. And then one becomes two. And then, weeks go by and, I hit like, for me, it's all of this like gluttonous food, right? This very, I should say glutinous food, like the breads, the pastries, the pastas, and the things like that. Um, and yeah, it started with a simple little pastry in the beginning of November, and around Thanksgiving, it ended up being stuffing and macaroni and cheese and rolls. And, I know I'm really into it when I find myself only wanting to eat bread. It's fucking nuts, So that's one of them. Shopping is another one. And I will tell you, this holiday season, any holiday season, it's tough, right? I have a bit of a shopping addiction, and this can often be like Black Friday sales for my business, like, oh, I need that, oh, I need this, like really trying to justify this. And it's also gifts for others, right? Like I love gifting people things. I really do. It brings me a lot of joy to be able to like kind of, you know, it just does. And, I will literally shop early, right, to get it all done so that I don't have the stress of doing it later. And then I'll keep buying them things, and justifying it. And, as I said, the control and the perfectionism, I've worked really hard on this one for a long time, probably since my 20s. Uh, you know, and sometimes it's easier than it is others. But like right now, I don't have a tree or any type of Christmas decorations really up, and somatically in my body, that feels a bit uncomfortable, um, but not as bad as it once used to. And I've just started to kind of write down some things and tackle the planning for Yule, which is pretty much 7 days, 6 days from now. And if I were to look back, the old me, like many, many moons ago, maybe even just in early recovery, I probably would have been very buttoned up, so to speak, in this regards, because it was a way of, I don't know, giving me some sense of, I don't know, the sense of control gives you a sense of like dis disillusioned, role in your life. I don't even know how else to explain that. And I mentioned food was probably my first addiction, and I said I do think I know what happened. And I have this really vague memory. Once upon a time, I don't know, I think it was maybe year 2 or 3 in my recovery. I did all of these like childhood regression sessions. I would kind of had somebody ask me a bunch of questions. I'd put myself into a deep trance, and I would be questions related to my childhood and various stages of my childhood. And one of them that came up as I was sitting and prepping the notes today was this memory of equating food to love, right? Like the way I was shown love as a child was through food, right? And because I don't think we quite understand, that a roof over our head and things of that nature offer also a reflection of love. But I have these memories of a child being, younger and upset and hurt, or, whatever it is, and food being the answer, right? And as I said, my turn is these really soft, tasty, glutinous things, right? The breads, the cakes, the cookies, pastries, even like from a pasta perspective. And these are often, I find, things that are really easy to consume as well. And so when it comes to the holiday season and where I'm like overextending myself, planning too many commitments or anything of that nature, these tend to be easy solutions for food, yet they really don't nourish my body. Um, in the past, it was also like food and eating was a way to kind of avoid interactions at family gatherings, and I look back as a child. You could eat it, you could talk about it, who made it, what was it like, all of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't frowned upon to go back for more. And it was like this numbing agent to like ground myself in these environments that were very uncomfortable for myself. Right. So just as I was an adult and I did it with alcohol, I've done it for much of my life through food at these holiday gatherings. Uh, and shopping, there's this expectation of gift giving over the holidays. And I just can't quite come to terms with it because me personally, I prefer experiences. Like I prefer somebody asking me out to lunch, to dinner, to coffee. I prefer somebody coming over and just sitting and hanging out with me, but yet there's this expectation of gift giving. And as I said, I love to give gifts. I really do. So there's this like dopamine of thinking, oh, I can't wait till they opened it. Oh, it's going to be the best gift ever. Oh, they're going to love it, right? Ugh, gross, right? Um, and you know, the control and the perfectionism, where did this come from? There's a lot of family dynamics. I grew up walking on eggshells around my father, and things had to go as planned for him. And I realize now that my mother and a lot of her own kind of like OCD tendencies were to make sure that he wasn't upset, which then, rolled down to us children. So I've spent much of my adult life working on these things. But like from the holiday, when we think about things that could potentially trigger and lead us toward a relapse, there are all these expectations, right? There are all of these, like these family dynamics that come into play. There are even just these ways that we're going about like protecting ourselves or our energetics. Um, and I look back and even now, right? As I said, I kind of relapsed on the food piece. How do I get back into my recovery after a relapse? Is like, I have to forgive myself first. I'm a human being having a human experience, right? And I try to lean into some kind of ritual that I can connect to, like leaning back into something. So, why am I sharing all of this with you? Is because the holidays can often suck. They really can. Think about it all the way from Halloween to New Year's Eve. There are societal expectations, there are family dynamics, there are things that situations energetically that we may find that we need to like protect ourselves from and we don't know how, right? And these pressures and these expectations are often us, but because they've been set by society and our family, right? Think about this as we go all the way back to Halloween, right? The kids must go out trick-or-treating. They have to get a costume. They have to do this. They've got to show up for school. All of these things, they just start like all of these little nitpicks, right? And then we go into like, oh, well, you shouldn't be eating all of their candies. You got to get rid of their candy. Their candy isn't good. And then we get into who's going to host Thanksgiving and who's cooking what. And I don't like that. And they suck at making this. And I want this for Christmas. I don't want anything for Christmas. I'm so sad you didn't get me anything for Christmas. And we've got to drive 4 hours to see who? I haven't, like talked to them in 2 years. And I'm not doing that again this New Year's Eve, right? All of these pressures, all of these expectations, and then you add in the fact that we are moving into, we've basically since fall, right? But we've been moving into the darkest, longest nights of the year. And they're a recipe for a relapse, my dear friends. They are a recipe. As a matter of fact, relapse rates can increase by 150% during the holiday, and that peak is between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Alcohol-related fatalities on average are about 36 per day, which is so fucking sad. But during Christmas, it goes from 36 up to, I believe it's 45, and New Year's, it's from 36 up to 54, which is fucking wild, right? They happen. Relapses happen. And sometimes, often, a relapse is the first step towards weeks, months, and sometimes even years of continuing in our addiction spiral. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can strengthen yourself and see whatever you're going through, even if it is a relapse, as a way to kind of strengthen your own recovery journey. And the number one thing that I encourage you to do is practice forgiveness. If it happens, turn towards forgiveness for yourself. You're human. You're a human being. You're not perfect. It doesn't exist. Perfection does not exist. And if you experience those feelings of guilt and shame for experiencing or going through a relapse, don't linger in them too long. It's okay that they happen, right? But they are low vibrational emotions that are not serving you. Guilt and shame tend to keep our vibrations incredibly low, which can then lead us into depression, which can then lead us to keep relapsing over and over again. So forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for being a human and making a mistake. That's all it was. And once you've done that, reflect upon the triggers or whatever would have gotten you there. Maybe even take a moment to journal about it, write it down, right? Take a look and see, how were you caring for yourself during that time? I myself, when the relapses started, I had been God, I don't even know how many events I'd had up until that point, right? Basically from the beginning of September all the way until the middle of November. It was it was a lot. Um, and I look back at what I could have done differently, and I could have stopped other work if I knew I had those events to be a commitment towards. Or I could have bowed out of those events, and I literally, because of this, I have decided to bow out of events for next year because I don't want to find myself back in the same spot, right? Meaning I change something so that I don't find myself back there. Sure, I may have an event come up that I decide to do, but as far as the schedule that I'd kept every single Sunday and multiple 2-day, or I should say 4-day shows, at least one every month, if not two, I'm just not doing it again. And then create a relapse prevention plan, right? I think the number one thing that can include is setting boundaries for gathering and saying no to events that you don't want to go to. It is so true. You don't have to. I know so many of us feel an obligation, right? Like, oh, we can't say no. But trust me, you do not have to go to everything, and you do not have to go to anything when you're asked. No is an acceptable answer. And when they ask why, just say, because I said so. Because I don't want to. You owe them no explanation, right? Let some of your sober friends know, or maybe the folks that don't drink, that support you in recovery, that you're going to be texting or calling them when things get tough. And then make a commitment to attend extra support meetings or check-ins during the holidays, right? In case you didn't know, I do host a weekly recovery circle for witches every single Monday night. Right. And I know at the tail end, it'll tell you, you can download the Sober Witch Life mobile app and it'll give you the details on it. At the end of the day, I'd encourage you, if you find yourself in a relapse, to go through these things, forgive yourself, reflect upon what it is that brought you into that relapse in the first place, create a prevention plan to make sure that you don't do it again. But most importantly here, after that forgiveness, is recommit to your sobriety. Every minute is a new minute, every day is a new day, and anytime you can recommit to your journey. One of the ways that I know I really love to kind of do that and to like help ground myself is I will use the Witch's Serenity Prayer. Right. I'll use that prayer just in case you've never heard it before. Let me go ahead and share that with you because I think it's incredibly beautiful. You can use the general, the regular, which I have done many, many times. But the Witch's Serenity Prayer, oh, divine universe, grant me the power of water to accept with ease and grace what I cannot change, the power of fire to invoke courage to change the things that I can, the power of air for clarity to know the difference between the two of those, and the power of earth to ground me in my highest vibrational path. You can recommit to your recovery journey at any time, my dear. Any fucking time. You get to make that choice. That being said, if you do need some extra help and support, as I mentioned, you can always join the weekly recovery circle. You can always reach out to me directly. That being said, much love from me to all of you during this holiday season and any others to come. You got this. I promise.